My girlfriend cheated on me, and now she's losing it over my FWB relationship with her stepmother's sister. I need to let this out. Some might judge me for what I'm about to share, while others might understand. Either way, it doesn't matter. I'm a 33-year-old guy, and this is the story of how my relationship with my girlfriend, Mia, 30F, fell apart and how I ended up finding unexpected solace with someone I never anticipated. I met Mia during my college years, after serving 4 years in the military. From the moment I saw her, I was drawn to her, but I held back. She was 2 years ahead of me in school, and even though I was older, it felt awkward to make a move. But Mia broke the ice herself. One day, she walked up to me on campus and teased me about being shy since I didn't talk to many people. I laughed it off because shy was the last word anyone would use to describe me. During my military days, I had built quite the reputation as someone who enjoyed the company of women. Let's just say I wasn't lacking in companionship. After that conversation, we started spending a lot of time together, and on her birthday, we officially became a couple. For a while, everything felt perfect. Mia graduated and moved back to her hometown, where she started working as a teacher. Her hometown was only an hour away, so we still saw each other often, spending nearly all our free time together. When I graduated, I found a job in Mia's town, and we decided to move in together. It felt like everything was falling into place. But then came the day that changed everything. It all started innocently enough. I was giving a coworker a ride home because his car wouldn't start, and his place happened to be near the school where Mia worked. As we drove past, I decided to call her and see if she was still at work. She told me she was grading papers and would be home late. That seemed fair enough, until I noticed her car wasn't in the school parking lot. I casually mentioned I was nearby and offered to stop by, but she quickly told me not to bother and to just head home. Her tone was off, and that's when the doubt crept in. I didn't press the issue, but when she came home an hour later, acting like nothing was wrong, my suspicions only grew. That night, I decided to test her reaction by initiating intimacy, but she brushed me off, claiming she was too tired. Instead, she suggested planning a date night over the weekend. I played along, agreeing to the idea, but by then I already felt certain something wasn't right. The next morning, while she was in the shower, I couldn't resist checking her phone. Sure enough, there were texts between her and someone named Liza. The messages seemed cryptic, with gaps that suggested she had deleted parts of the conversation. I didn't confront her immediately. Instead, I started planning my next steps. Throughout the week, Mia kept asking about our date night plans. I made a point of acting enthusiastic, telling her I had something special in mind. On Friday, I went all out. I took the day off work, ordered flowers to be delivered to her school, and included a note saying how much I was looking forward to our weekend. She texted me back, saying she loved me and couldn't wait. That evening, she came home in high spirits, noticing my packed bags by the door. Confused, she asked where we were going. That's when I told her I was leaving because I knew about Liza. The color drained from her face, and she broke down immediately, confessing that she had cheated, claiming it happened only once. I was stunned at how quickly she admitted it, especially since I didn't even have solid proof. When I asked her why, she said Liza made her feel good about herself. She begged me to work things out, but I told her I needed time to think. I packed my things and left, checking into an extended stay hotel. Those first few days were rough. Mia had been the only woman I ever seriously considered marrying. I was heartbroken, but also relieved I found out before we got married or had kids. As time passed, I started hanging out more with friends from work, trying to distract myself. One night, a coworker invited me to an open mic comedy show. It was there that I ran into Mia's stepmother's youngest sister, Emma. I had met Emma once at a family event, but we hadn't talked much back then. This time, we struck up a conversation, and she remembered me. Emma was stunning, confident, and had a sharp sense of humor. We clicked instantly, and by the end of the night, we exchanged numbers and made plans to attend another show together. At that point, I was still texting Mia occasionally, trying to process everything that had happened. But Emma was quickly becoming the highlight of my life. After our second comedy show, one thing led to another. We ended up back at my hotel, where things took an unexpected but thrilling turn. That night was unlike anything I had ever experienced before. Emma and I agreed to keep things casual, and our FWB, Friends with Benefits, arrangement began. About a month later, Mia somehow found out about Emma and lost it. She called me in tears, cursing me and accusing me of betraying her. She even dragged her dad and stepmother into the drama. Her dad initially threatened me, but when I calmly reminded him that Mia had cheated first, he backed down. He even apologized, admitting he hadn't known about her infidelity. Mia, however, wouldn't let it go. She started texting me every day, begging for another chance. I responded occasionally, but only out of politeness. Meanwhile, my connection with Emma continued to grow. Looking back, I'm grateful for how things unfolded. Mia's betrayal hurt, but it also pushed me to move on and find clarity. I still care about her as a person, but only in the sense that I hope she finds her own peace. As for me, I've moved forward and life is better for it. Now on to the next story, story 2. Cheat on your wife with mine? I will burn your life to the ground. Back in the early 2000s, I started noticing signs that something was off with my wife. Our kids were still little, around 4 and 6 years old, but old enough to share bits and pieces about their day. They began mentioning how often they stayed with my wife's parents. At first, it didn't seem unusual since her parents lived about 90 minutes away. But when this became a twice or even thrice weekly occurrence, it felt excessive, especially since she worked only part-time. When I confronted her, she brushed it off, but she's never been a skilled liar. My gut told me something was wrong, so I decided to track her car's mileage. It quickly became apparent that she was driving an extra 400 miles every week. That confirmed my suspicions. Something shady was definitely happening. One afternoon, I sat at the computer and noticed a sticky note with her AOL password casually left beside the keyboard. Curiosity got the better of me, and I logged into her email. What I found validated my fears. Several exchanges between her and her college best friend revealed she was having regular hookups with one of her high school ex-boyfriends. There wasn't much identifying detail about the guy, but she and her friend mocked his wife, laughing about how she'd gained weight after having kids. I printed the emails, tucked them away, and started plotting my next steps. To get concrete proof, I reached out to a buddy who was a cop. He referred me to a private investigator, Tom, who had left the force and built a solid reputation in his new career. Tom was thorough. I handed him the emails and shared what little I knew about my wife's recent behavior. In a matter of weeks, Tom pieced together a detailed report complete with times, dates, and photos. His findings confirmed everything. My wife would drop the kids off at her parents', meet her ex for lunch, and then spend a couple of hours with him at a rundown motel before picking up the kids and heading home like nothing happened. At this point, I decided to file for divorce. Growing up, both my parents had cheated on each other, and the chaos it created in our home left scars that never really healed. I refused to let my kids go through that. I asked Tom to dig into the other guy, and as always, he delivered. I learned that his name was Ben. He was married with 3 kids, and he worked as a VP of sales at his father-in-law's company. That little nugget piqued my interest. With the evidence in hand, I met with my lawyer to draft the divorce papers. I also made arrangements for Tom to handle one final task. On the day my wife was served with the divorce papers at her workplace, Tom paid a visit to Ben's wife. He handed her everything, photos, timestamps, and all the sordid details of their affair. She had every right to know what her husband had been doing behind her back. What she did with the information was her decision, but I couldn't just let it slide. While the evidence of my wife's infidelity didn't play a significant role in my divorce proceedings, thanks to no-fault laws, Ben's wife took the information and ran with it. From what I later gathered through court records, she went scorched earth on him. She emptied their joint bank account, packed up the kids, and left. When her father learned about the affair, he fired Ben from his job, and since her parents owned their home, Ben was promptly evicted as well. Their divorce was a disaster. It spiraled into ugly court battles, restraining orders, and even physical confrontations. During one heated argument at the house, Ben ended up with a broken nose courtesy of his ex-wife's brother. Police reports, criminal charges, and even jail time followed. The last I heard, Ben had left the state altogether. He seems to have vanished from the internet. Meanwhile, Ben's ex-wife landed on her feet. She started working at her dad's company and eventually took over when he retired. As for me, I made peace with the situation. My ex-wife and I maintained a civil relationship for the sake of our kids, but I kept all communication strictly about them. Now that they're grown, I no longer have any reason to talk to her. I don't harbor hatred. It's more like indifference. She'll always be their mom, and for that, she's important. But beyond that, she's irrelevant to me. I moved on with my life, but I made sure to send a clear message. Betrayal has consequences. Now on to the next story. Story 3. I'm going to divorce my wife after she said she wanted to send our son to a conversion camp. This is a really heavy situation, and I'm honestly feeling lost and disgusted right now. I never thought my wife, 44F, would act this way, but here we are. My name is David, 45M, and I've been married to my wife for 14 years. We have 2 kids, a 16-year-old son, let's call him Ben, and a 12-year-old daughter. Like any couple, we've had our disagreements over the years, but for the most part, our relationship has been smooth. Or at least, that's how it appeared to me until recently. The issue started about a year ago when Ben came out as gay. To be honest, it was a surprise and it took me a little time to process. But I love my kids more than anything, and above all, I want them to be happy. Ben's sexuality doesn't change how I feel about him. However, my wife didn't react the same way. She was upset and seemed to go through a kind of grieving period, during which she didn't really talk about it. I did my best to support Ben, constantly reminding him that I loved him no matter what, but my wife seemed distant. She would make comments like, "It's just a phase," or "he needs help," and I brushed it off, thinking she just needed time to come to terms with it. Fast forward to last week, when things took a very disturbing turn. We were having a conversation about Ben's future, and out of nowhere, my wife casually mentioned that she had been looking into conversion therapy camps. She told me she thought Ben wasn't really gay and that he just hadn't been shown the right path. She actually said that this therapy could fix him. At that moment, I was in complete shock. I immediately told her I didn't agree and that I could not support such an idea. She got upset, accusing me of enabling Ben's confusion, and told me that if I really cared about him, I would help him get better. I was horrified. I tried to explain that conversion therapy is not only harmful, but incredibly dangerous. Kids who go through it often face abuse, are sometimes sexually assaulted, and many end up severely traumatized or even commit suicide. Despite this, my wife refused to back down. She kept insisting that it was for Ben's own good. If I'm being completely honest, I don't even think I love her anymore. I'm disgusted by her lack of empathy. I know that being gay is already difficult enough in this world, and people like my wife make it that much harder. I've been considering staying in the marriage only for the sake of our daughter, but the more I think about it, the more I feel like I'm betraying Ben. How could I live with someone who thinks that this is acceptable? I've gotten a lot of support here, and I want to thank everyone who reached out. I apologize if I couldn't respond to all the messages. There were just too many. But here's an update for everyone who's been following along. A couple of days ago, I posted about my wife wanting to send Ben to a conversion camp, and many of you suggested that I show her videos or documentaries about what happens in those places. The truth is, I've already tried that. I've shown her plenty of information, but she won't budge. The situation only got worse. So, here's the latest. I took some of your advice and went to see a lawyer to get information about divorce. After what happened yesterday, I'm now 100% sure I want to go through with it. Yesterday, I picked Ben up from school, and we had a long conversation, just like many of you suggested. I told him that his mom and I might be getting a divorce because she wants to send him to a conversion camp, and I just can't support that. I've spoken with her many times about this, and Ben seemed to understand, though he looked hurt, which broke my heart. He thanked me for standing up for him, and I gave him a tight hug, reassuring him that I will always love him, no matter what. It was during this moment that Ben started crying. He was so relieved to know that at least one of his parents was on his side. I found out that for months, my wife had been pressuring him. She had arranged dates with girls, trying to fix him, and Ben had to lie to get out of them, telling her he was going to a friend's house instead. She kept saying that Ben needed help, that as much as she loved him, he needed to be cured of his condition. This was heartbreaking to hear, and I can't believe I was so oblivious to what Ben had been going through. After the conversation, I went home and confronted my wife. I was furious, and at first, she tried to explain that she was doing this for Ben's own good. But her defense quickly turned into slurs and insults. It was clear she wasn't ashamed of the therapy, but of having a gay son. I told her that I had already consulted a lawyer, and I was filing for divorce. That's when she became furious, calling me a delusional disgrace, and we had a huge argument. Ben tried to step in, but my wife punched him multiple times, calling him horrible names and blaming him for the divorce. She said he was a dirty faggot and that his filth had corrupted me. At this point, our daughter came out of her room, and she was rightfully horrified by the scene. She immediately called 911 when I told her to. The cops arrived and took my wife away. She was still in denial, refusing to accept any responsibility for her actions. As for me, I ended up in the hospital because my wife broke my rib while I was restraining her. I should have probably gone right to the hospital when the cops took her, but I didn't care. Ben was in worse shape with a black eye and a split lip, and they're checking for any concussion. All I cared about was comforting him. I can't even imagine what it must feel like to be beaten by your own mother simply for being who you are. I'm now planning to file for full custody of both kids. They don't want anything to do with their mother anymore, and given the charges she's facing, I'm confident she won't stand a chance. I just sent an email to my lawyer, hoping that the proceedings will be fast. I'm also considering involving CPS, but I'm not sure how helpful they will be. I'll never understand how someone can grow so resentful of their own child over something they can't control. I had my own strong opinions about it when I was younger, but as a father, it's my job to unconditionally love my kids. I learned and grew, and I never once doubted my love for Ben. I thought my wife felt the same, but I was wrong.